flood market of Michigan.
So, three of the risks here, in particularly in Michigan, I want to talk really about, you're not really going to hear me talk much about risk like in New York or other areas. I really want y'all to take away the local risk here. And, how do we possibly change those? How do we educate our clients? And some things like that. So really there's three big things here in Michigan. As I said, snowmelt, like I've talked a little bit already. It's flash flooding. And a big one is development that we see. So as these areas are developed, in a natural setting in a rural area, you got 90% of rain that gets saturated into the soil. When you develop an area, that goes to 10%. Generally, there's a lot of cement. There's a lot of asphalt that's put in the area, and that water has to end up somewhere. This is very common in Arizona because Arizona has more floods every year than any other state. And a lot of it has to do is they have so much cement, the desert's so hard, there's nowhere for the water to go. And so these are three kind of big risks here in Michigan. So when someone comes to you and says, hey, my home flooded, I didn't have flood insurance, it's never flooded before, I don't understand why it flooded, then that's when we start asking the questions of, was it a flash flooding event? Was it a river flooding? Was it maybe because of development? Because they're like, my house flooded, but flood insurance is required, I don't know why it flooded. Because automatically property owners think that when you look at a flood map, I'm going to teach you how to read one of those in a minute, that if it's not required, their property's not going to flood. Now, when we talk about flood risk here in Michigan too, and people kind of laugh at me when I say this, but coastal erosion and coastal flooding is a big issue in Michigan. Do y'all do a lot up in like Lake Michigan area, like the secondary homes and the lake homes? Have y'all had a lot of flooding that has happened up there? And so a lot of it actually is from coastal flooding. Chicago gets hit with this really hard. More coastal flooding actually happens in Michigan every year than it does in areas like Florida, North Carolina. And one reason is a lot of people don't think about the Great Lakes being a coastal area because they don't think of, hey, it's a lake, it's not a beach, it's not an ocean, it's not a beach. Well, in fact, it has the same impacts. And so when it comes to coastal, Michigan does have a big coastal flooding problem on Lake Michigan. And so that's one of the big risks here in Michigan is you've got your coastal, you've got your snowmelt, your rainfall. It's very similar to North Carolina that has mountain threat, it has flat threat, it has a coastal threat. So it can be very challenging understanding all these different things when you're educating your clients, whether they're up on Lake Michigan or they're in Detroit.